Well, again, thank you all for coming. Louise, you have been the heart and the soul of the Darien Library for 35 years, and you have made the Darien Library become the heart and soul of the town of Darien. Maybe you can tell us how you came here 35 years ago.
Well, Ann Mandel is the one who recruited me for this job. I was working up in Westport, and Ann, as you know, is very direct, and Ann showed up in my office one day and said, well, are you going to apply for this job or not? But I had known that the Darien Library job was open. I had not seen an ad for it, but I was delighted for Mrs. Mandel to show up in my office and ask me to apply, and I've been happily here ever since.
How persistent was she during the recruiting?
I have my side of this story.
Here we go.
Oops. Close enough?
Yep.
Is it?
It's on.
Yeah.
We had a personnel committee, and they were doing a fine job getting a whole lot of old bags in here. And so I thought we needed to look a little further. So I called a few people I knew in the library world, or knew about, whom I thought might make some good recommendations. They all pointed to one person, and it was Louise. One of the people I happened to call was a man named John Berry, who was not married to Louise, but he was the editor of Library Journal, so I thought he'd know a little bit about the library world. Anyway, they all pointed to Louise, so I thought we better go find her, and we did. And I also had to convince certain board members that she was a good person to hire, because Louise was an adorable, little, skinny girl with her little silk foulard bow ties, and she did not look like a librarian. So some board members had to be convinced, but not for long. Who asks the next question?
I think you do.
Oh. Well, what would you like to be your hallmark? What would you like to really be your legacy?
Well, I would like for what we call our extreme customer service to be my legacy here. And I know when I was hired, you were the president of the library, and that was an issue that you were very concerned about how the library treated its patrons, its members, its customers, and it was not our strength 35 years ago. And it was always a passion of mine to make the library very approachable, because I still remember my very first time going into a library when I was about 5 years old and found it a very intimidating place. So when I came, I really wanted to turn that around. The board wanted that to be turned around, and I wanted to make that something that Darien Library was known for. And quite a number of years ago, I was very reassured when we would have staff meetings, and our staff we would be talking about customer service, not in the library, but customer service out at banks and the Department of Motor Vehicles and other places around town. And our staff would say in the board meeting, that would never happen in Darien Library. And that's when I realized that had become a really profound part of our culture that was far beyond my vision and my leadership, that it was something that the whole staff really embraced. And our staff now absolutely embraces that as what is the heart and soul of Darien Library, and it's noticed by other people who come and visit us. It was very satisfying for all of us. We built this beautiful new building to have people come and see it, and a lot of people came to see it because it was a new building and people like to go and visit new buildings. But library directors, time and time again, came into the building, came to see the building, and noticed how friendly and customer service oriented our staff were, and they would say to me, how did you do that? How did that happen? Because it was noticeable difference. And I love that about Darien Library, and that is indeed what I would hope will live long past my retirement.
Louise, over the last 35 years, you've put the Darien Library on a global recognition scale. Certainly nationally, you've always been very highly ranked. What is it about the secret sauce of what you developed here in the town of Darien? Do you think that there's a unique relationship there, or would this have worked somewhere else? Is there something unique about the positioning of this library in Darien and how you developed the relationship with the town?
I do think that there's a unique atmosphere, a synergy here in Darien that goes back, you know, even before my time here in terms of the way this community supports its library. When I look at the history of the Darien Library and I see Harold McGraw in his 30s willing to take the time to be president of the library and build our old building on 35 Leroy, and right at a time when most people are very involved in building their own career. People like Ann and Steve Mandel, totally committed to Darien Library, George Wyper, Kim Huffer, David Campbell, all the people who built this building. And when Alice McGill did our 100th anniversary video, she called it a Yankee passion. And I think there was a passion in this town for building a library that is unique. I mean, there's no reason why Darien should be as highly ranked and as well thought of as it is, with really almost no one coming close to that, except for the kind of wonderful support that we've gotten from the town, from the trustees, from the community.
Well, there is a reason, Louise. And it's you. I really do think that. And I think that that public service that you talked about before will truly be your legacy here. So what's been fun here?
Well, I've never been bored out of the whole 35 years that I've been here, but I think that that what has been most fun for me has been the opportunity to work with so many interesting people. The ones I mentioned before, you know, obviously Harold, you and Steve, George, all of the people who've been president of the Darien Library, and there's some here, Jim Holtz, Jim Clark, lots of very interesting trustees. It's always been a real learning experience for us. When Terry Lautenbach was president, we said he brought us up to the IBM standard because we we learned to really up our game to meet the standards of IBM, and it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. I think for me the joy is in seeing the way our community, and particularly the children in this community, love the library, because I still remember being intimidated as a child in the kind of old-fashioned library, and I see the children come into this children's room with joy on their face, and our children's staff is absolutely the best in the world, and they're so welcoming, and children are so happy, and there's a joy to being a librarian. I had a friend once who said, who was in advertising, who said to me, "You're so lucky you have a career where you're doing something that benefits society, because all I'm doing is selling Wonder Bread." And I do think that for being a librarian, that part of it is, there is a joy in that, because you feel like you are doing something that is worthwhile. And then, although it's kind of funny to admit it, but one of the fun things that I've liked as a library director is I really like the budget process. I mean, it's a long, long process here in Darien, but it is democracy at its finest, because it is a very thorough process, and I have always loved that aspect of fighting for our share of the town budget, and going through the process and educating people about what the library can do, and that has been a lot of fun.
So throughout the history of America, Louise, people never want to follow the superstar. Nobody wanted to be chairman of Apple after Steve Jobs. Nobody wanted to follow Jack Welch. What do you say to the person following you?
Well, fortunately, he's here. Alan, where are you? Alan will be fabulous. Alan has been making me look good for the last 10 years, along with the rest of the staff, and I think it's going to be a very smooth transition. We've worked well together as a team. We have such an outstanding staff here that they'll make Alan look good too, but I have no worries.
How would you like to see the library? I mean, things that I think you were really so forward-looking when we got computers even, and how you realized that the library was going to be a community center, and as we've discussed earlier, really a refuge. And not just because of storms, but also when we had our economic downturn, the library was open for people looking for jobs, for resources for that. I mean, I think you've looked ahead, way ahead, certainly ahead of me. I was stuck on books. But I just wondered things we might be thinking about in the future as for a library.
Well, I think that when we were planning for this new building, we did a lot of thinking about the library of the future, and indeed we called it the Library of the Future now. And I think that the idea that the library is this cultural heart of the community, that there's a big emphasis on cultural programming, that there are places for small groups of like-minded people, niches to gather and use the resources of the library. I think all of those things are going to continue to be a really strong role. We in our campaign, we talked about the library as the third place after home and work are the two places in the community, but the third place, the heart of the community, is the third place, and how the library fits into that role. And I feel that in a community like Darien, where we are very receptive to what our community wants, it's not the library saying, this is what the library is going to be. It's the library listening and reaching out in the community and figuring out how the library can meet those needs. The community doesn't come and tell you, oh, we're interested in audiobooks. I mean, when we first got our audiobook collection, no one had asked for them, but we could see that happening in other aspects of people's lives, and we said there's a role for the library. So we really hire our staff and encourage our staff to take risk and be innovative, and they're the ones that are reaching out and are bringing those ideas. I didn't, for instance, know anything about drones really when Aaron and John Wyper decided that that would be a really good program here at the library, and we had a waiting list. We built drones, they built drones, I didn't build a drone. But John Wyper had a drone, he was flying around here outside, so I think the important thing is for the library director, all of the ideas do not come out of the director's office, and really and truly most of the good ideas don't come out of the director's office. They come from the staff, and it's director's job to create an environment that encourages staff and encourages them to take risk. We say, Alan actually says, he encourages the staff to take risk, and he always says, if there's a failure, it'll be my fault. If it's a success, it'll be to your credit. And he really empowers the staff to take risk, and I think that is unusual in libraries, that we empower our staff, and we're willing, those of us in the corner offices are willing to take the blame if they fail, and that way we get staff that are really willing to try, because they have nothing to lose.
Next spring, when you walk out of here, it's hard to imagine after 35 years that you're going to go from here to cold turkey. So, to the town that you and John are retiring to, do they know what's going to hit them in their local library? And are you anticipating keeping your hand in the game?
I am not going to keep my hand in the game. The local librarian in Newport, New Hampshire has already told me how nervous she is about us moving up there, because she knows about Darien Library's reputation. So I'm going to stay out of her hair. I really plan to do some really boring stuff for a couple of years. I've only worked in libraries, so I've never worked in any other job except babysitting and libraries. You know, I never waited tables, I've never had any other jobs, they've always been library jobs, but I've been doing it since I was 13 years old. So I am looking forward to doing, you know, some kind of like really boring stuff, travel, read, cook, those kinds of things, and the other thing too is Darien Library is so special, I can't imagine trying to do anything in another library without being very frustrated. So I'm just going to follow the accomplishments of Darien Library from New Hampshire and see what Alan and this staff comes up with next. And I'm prepared to be surprised, because even now I'm surprised at some of the wonderful things that our staff comes up with and have implemented.
Speaking of those, I happen to have the annual report here, and I think there are plenty outside, aren't there?
Yes, there are on a table right outside.
And it's sort of a redundant question because it lists all the wonderful things that have been done this year, but I think you should tell us a little bit about some of the achievements, the recent achievements, besides the generator.
Well, I think we had an extraordinary year of cultural programming in this year, and Erin Shea is our head of adult programming, and Dulcie, of course, is chair of the programming committee for the board, and we have just had a wonderful array of programs. Our goal for programs in Darien Library is to make sure the program, the people who present have something to say, and that they say it well. So if an author has written a really good book but they're not a good presenter, you're better off just reading the book. So we really try to create that quality in our programming, and I think that we had some really good examples of it this year. We had a program, this is my favorite program story, because I got an email from someone, because director gets a lot of emails, even that don't belong to the director, but I got an email from someone who wanted to do a harmonica program here. And the email had this, obviously English was not this person's first language, and it was not very well written, and I almost deleted it. My hand was on the delete button when I said, you know, you're not in charge of adult programs here. Erin is in charge of adult programs, and it's her decision. So I sent it to Erin, and I just said, I make no judgments. Well, Erin got back to me, and she said, you know, I went online and I saw a YouTube performance of this guy, and he's really very engaging, and I'm thinking maybe we should do it. And I thought, oh my God, I can't imagine that anybody will come to a harmonica program. But I said nothing, because it's not my job. Erin is here. So Erin goes ahead and plans her harmonica program. And I'm thinking, oh my God. You know, so I always come to as many programs as I can, and I particularly come to the ones where I think maybe the audience might need a little bit of a boost. But before I even said to my husband, John Berry, that we needed to go to the harmonica program, John gets the e-blast, and he says, there's a harmonica program. I want to go. I said, well, good, because it could be a very small group, and that's what Erin kept saying. There may only be 3 or 4 people, but it's worth a try, and I like to reach out to other audiences. Well, we had standing room only for the harmonica program. It was, some of you were here. I know I see some of you were here. I mean, he was really, really engaging. It was a very interesting program, and people said to me when they were leaving, they said, I had no idea what to expect, but I came because I had no idea what to expect, but there was some sense that it would probably be good because the library was doing it. So I think that was a highlight. The drone program was a highlight. The fact that we have this collaboration with the Museum of Modern Art is really, yeah, this is very exciting. Stephanie Anderson's been coordinating that, but we have passes for corporate membership in the Museum of Modern Art with passes, where you can take 6 people in and get in. We have curators coming from the Museum of Modern Art. One coming out fairly recently to talk about highlights of the Museum of Modern Art, and one to talk about the Magritte exhibit, which is their big, huge exhibit. We bought all of the books current books at the Museum of Modern Art. We're going to have an artist in residence. I mean, it's a whole collaboration unlike any that has been done. And I think that is very exciting.
So what would you advise a young, new man or woman coming out of the library school today? How would you advise them? What would you say is the future for them in the library business?
Well, I would advise them to have a real passion about working in a library. I mean, that's what we look for when we hire people, is we look for the customer service part of it, the hospitality quotient, but we also look for people that have a real passion about what they would like to do. And I think to be a risk taker, be willing to take risks, and to be a good listener.
You know, this one thing we haven't talked about is your leadership role beyond the Darien Library in the whole library profession. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because every place I go, people have heard of you.
Well, I think now that's primarily because they've heard of Darien Library. I mean, I have been active in my year as over 40 years as a librarian, active in the American Library Association, active in the Connecticut Library Association. But I think where people are mostly aware now of me by name is because of the reputation of the library, and for that I'm getting a lot of credit for all the incredible work that the staff has done here. And when we started hiring some of his staff, someone blogged about, said Darien Library is assembling a powerhouse, and because we were hiring and we were recruiting, we weren't just advertising and selecting from people who applied. We were recruiting some of the top librarians in the country to come here and work for us. And then other staff that we hired right out of library school, we encouraged to also go out there and make their names. So I think that really and truly now, it's Darien Library that has the reputation. And I'm associated with it as a director because the staff's making me look really good. But the staff, we have staff, Kira, who just was on the Caldecott Committee, and Claire, and all of our staff that are so active in the professional associations, and are making a huge reputation for themselves and for Darien Library.
Well, you know, I've always thought, I don't think I've ever expressed this before, but Louise and John Berry have a very talented son named Thomas, and he was born a little bit late, not anymore, but, and Louise was the most pregnant woman I have ever seen in my life. Anyway, I always thought that one reason why you were a little bit tethered to the Darien Library and didn't accept some other offer, which I know you've probably had, just because Thomas, you wanted to be here and watch him grow up, etc., and you didn't want to move to some Seattle or someplace where you might have had an offer. Now tell us if that's true.
Well, I think when I came to Darien Library, I assumed that I would be here about 5 years, and that I would move to larger libraries. But every time there came a time that would have been like a logical time for me to move to another library, something incredibly exciting was going on here in Darien. And I felt like, well, I want to stay through this, you know. And then it got to a point where we had such a great staff, and we had so much going on. I thought, you know, I don't really want to go somewhere else and try to rebuild all this. I mean, this is the perfect job. And there was no, for me, any great incentive of bigger is better. I like this size library because even as a library director, you can have a lot of interaction directly with people who use the library. You're not up in an office, so many layers removed, that you don't have any direct interaction, and you can, you know, the budget process, working with community groups, you get to know everyone, and you can still do all of those things. So I've never really wanted to go to a much bigger library.
So I just have one final comment, and I'm sure Ann will have a final comment, which is that this last weekend I was up in New Haven for the inauguration of the new president of Yale. and he hosted us for lunch on Saturday, and he introduced to us a new term, which I thought was quite applicable to you as well. And he was describing all the good things that were going on up in New Haven these days, Nobel Prize winners, and building of new colleges, and all this stuff. And he said, I'm just verging. And we all looked around the room, and what on earth is he talking about? And I feel I have a pretty good command of the English language. And he said, I'm basking in the reflected glory of all that's going on. And frankly, serving on the library board for a number of years and being involved in projects with you over the years, it can't help but feel like we all, in that capacity, bask in the reflected glory of being around Louise Berry. So I want to thank you for that opportunity and for that experience and for you making the town of Darien all so much better for all of us.
I will just say, amen. That's it.